June 15th, 2016.
All right.
Thank you. First, we'll have a presentation of proposed budgets. Yes.
Before we go into the budget, just to kind of give you a little bit of follow-up as to certain things that we talked about from the last time you all met, which was well over 30 days ago. So there are certain projects and items that you all wanted to be able to place in the budget, and Ms. Callen and I were able to do that within the figures that we presented to you the last time we met. Some of those projects include money to complete a downtown master plan. We do have study money for the old mill. Of course, you know, we received the additional revenues in the franchise fees, so those will be posted to this current year's budget, and we will remove those funds in FY17 to cover the cost for the IT assessment, and then the remainder of those funds will be put into the contingency line item. And then also, one major purchase that we have is to finally move away from the financial software that we're using, One Solution, to go ahead and to move to another financial software. So those are a few items that we have been able to place in the budget based on comments, questions, and concerns. And we also have a branding study in the communications department also to be able to do some work there within that department. Any questions on any of those items? Yes, sir.
I just have a question. Is our contingency line item, does it remain, I think it's either 50 or 75,000 the past few years?
Oh, the past few years I have, but we have changed it dramatically this current budget.
Because of the funds that we're bringing in from the additional franchise fees. Is that for the current year 16, that those franchise fees are incorrectly?
Past 5 years.
Past 5 years combined?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And just to let you know, and Ms. Callen will show you on the slide when we go through the budget, that was a self-imposed audit by Greystone Power. So they did refund those money, they'll capture those funds for us. It has to be posted this year since we received it this year. And our recommendation to put it in contingency rather than fund balance is because, as you know, we shifted several projects to SPLOST. So if there are things that are in that list, if the SPLOST referendum does not happen to pass, you have those monies in contingency rather than pulling those out of your fund balance. The other is Ms. Callen will show you that she's projecting several increases in revenues. Just in case those are not realized, you have the money in contingency to do certain things there as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Callen.
All right, first we'll start with an overview of our budget process. At the end of April, we opened up our budget to the department directors. Of course, that would happen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Was that? And the department requests were completed by May 6th. Those are submitted to the city manager for review. After many meetings with each department, we were ready to present to the mayor and council on May 11th at the budget workshop. We did spend a full day going over each line in the budget in a very detailed manner. We discussed all the increases and decreases from the prior year. Today, we'll have the public hearing, and June 16th, we'll have the legislative work session, and we'll adopt the budget on June 20th. A summary of our general fund revenues. We're comparing 2016, which is our current year, as amended to the 2017 proposed. Our total budget for 2017 revenues is $28,506,289. The tax line item, we are projecting an increase of $531,529. That is due to partially franchise fees, our insurance premium tax, and also we're projecting a slight increase in the tax digest. When we do get the tax digest, we will have to make a decision on rolling back our millage rate or maintaining our millage rate. And that is a concept that in discussing with Mayor Pro Tem Yaki, he would like me to explain that a little more in detail. When we have property that is appreciated in value, or that's classified as not new construction, then the law requires us to roll back the millage equivalent of that value, so that you are not paying additional revenue just because your current property was assessed at a higher value. So although homeowners' houses might appreciate, the only way that we will realize new revenue is if we have new construction growth. So we've projected a slight increase there. And as Marcia mentioned earlier, we do have a contingency plan in the event that our tax digest does not increase by what we have budgeted.
Can you tell them when they'll have to make that decision?
We have received the tax digest in different times, but it's right in the middle of July to the end of July, depending on how the tax assessors, how fast they work or if they have any complications.
And our assumption is that you all will want to keep the same tax rate, so you're not going to want to be interested in raising taxes. So that decision still has to be made, even though you're not interested in that, based on what the tax digest looks like when it comes in. So you'll do that in possibly August.
Yes. So you might be looking at rolling back the millage rate. License and permits, projecting $99,443 increase. That's due to occupational licenses and building permits. Charges for service, which cover West Pines revenue, Jesse Davis, Hunter Park, room rentals, athletic fields mostly, a slight increase of $23,388. Fines and forfeitures, $63,004. A slight increase of $50 on investment income. And other financing sources is where you will see the one-time payment from our franchise. That's where that number is plugged in. It's another financing source.
Mr. Greystone,
Yes, sir.
correction.
Yes, sir.
Quick question, Ms. Calvin, how do you go about anticipating an increase in fines and forfeitures?
Based on historical trends. And number of police officers. So if they're fully staffed, we tend to have more. The 1 year they were down about 10 officers. We could really see that on the fines and forfeitures. Miscellaneous revenue, a decrease of $21,047 for an overall increase of $1.2 million. That's a 4% increase. If you were to take out the one-time payment, that would be a 2% increase. This shows a breakout of how our revenues, our total revenues percentage, taxes at 77%, and I'll have a breakdown of these specific taxes on the next slide. Charges for service, 6%, fines and forfeiture, 6%, and licenses and permits, 8%. The breakdown of our taxes, we have sales tax at 29%, and I'll go over our sales tax, local option sales tax agreement on a later slide. But we have 29% sales tax, franchise tax 10% of our total collection of taxes. Our bond millage rate, which is currently 1.616 at 8%. Property taxes, our current millage rate is 7.534 at 37%. General fund expenditures. Our general government line item, that includes legislative, city clerk, city manager, finance, legal, IT, HR, human resources, communications, engineering, non-departmental, and that's it for total general government. The increase of $679,209, that's due to a large part of the network engineering interdev that we've commissioned, which is around $250,000. That's also is where our contingency is programmed in, the non-departmental line item. So that increase is contingency in interdev. Judicial, $94,867. About $36,000 of that is due to the new contract that we have with Judge Rollins. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Just if you remember, Judge Rollins presented to you a few weeks ago about changes that he would like to make in the courts, and as far as adding another day That cost is included in that $94,867. That includes the overtime. That also includes the extra payment for him. Once you do approve the budget, he will be at leisure to manage the court operations as he sees fit within his budget.
So he's gonna be restricted to stay within the 823,000.
Yes, whichever, the budget, yes.
Yes. Or his specific salary, right? Because he doesn't control
Correct,
total.
correct.
Okay.
And this is all based on the operations of the courts. So, yes, that's all included in the proposed number with the 823,000.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hampton, you have thought about putting him on salary?
That hasn't been discussed that I know of in a meeting. I think that you all will have to make that decision if that's something that you want to do.
I didn't hear the question.
Salary rather than base it on things that the court takes. So that's how your regular pay is number based on something. If it's a salary, then it doesn't matter. Just cap at a certain amount.
I guess we can probably just look at that to see how, works out in regards to everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
No, he'd be over the threshold. Right now, the current threshold is like 47,000, so he'd be well above that. Yeah, and there are different ways. I think Captain, Joanne, I'm taking you back to Captain. You gotta hit me. The deputy chief had done some research about how judges are compensated and paid and how they're managed. There's no set formula. People do it different ways. Some are paid based on the days, some are paid via salary. I think it probably is just dictated by the budget. So if court continues to expand, that may be something that you want to look at, because as it expands per days and sessions, you're paying more money. So capping it probably provides some control to that cost.
But the $94,800 is the total cost of the additional days for everything.
Yes, that
Including his
includes
salary.
the operation of court.
Fines and forfeitures.
True.
So
Mhm.
it-
As he explained, also, he was taking into consideration with the extra day, because there's a lot of folks that do this overtime, and then they can't reach all the folks. They're getting overtime, so it could be worse than that.
And that was in line with the research that we saw with other judges' salary. It was in line. Yeah, it was in line. For public safety, there's a $414,000 increase. That is due to laptops that were out of warranty. We did increase our prisoner cost, and we also added a code enforcement officer and a vehicle for the code enforcement officer. Yeah.
Cost, you mean the county's charging us more per day?
Not more per day, but we are anticipating more volume. So it's not more per day, but more volume. Public Works, we have increased there. We do have a maintenance supervisor position approved. We do have buildings renovations at City Hall. I'm sorry, let me go back to public safety. One other note, we do currently have 3 civilian code enforcement officers, and we are adding 1. So we have 1 sergeant, 3 civilians, and we're adding 1.
Because of all the campaigns.
Never. And we do have police cars in the budget. That's part of our 5-year capital plan. We've
Yes.
continued to fund that, along with the chief providing funding for some as well out of drug funds.
Yes, so public safety is very well funded. I know this was something that you had mentioned during our workshop at Baiting Mills in January. So public safety is very well funded. Culture and recreation, we are showing a decrease of $181,000, and that is due to not having projects in the current budget that we did in, projects in the subsequent budget that we have in the current budget, such as Wheeling Workers, Mill Village, Jesse Davis Field renovation. During the current budget year, we did have quite a good many, as most of you know, capital projects.
And I'll add to that, that goes back to the comment that I made about putting the money in contingency. So when we were planning for this year's budget, several of those items had not been completed. So the decision was made not to plug them into this year's budget, but to put them in SPOS to see if, since they can go under Parks and Rec, to see if SPOS referendum were to pass. Now, if it does not pass, and in January, you all will have some money in contingency to decide whether or not you want to utilize those funds to complete those projects. But they are there. The other, just going back to Public Works real quick on the position for maintenance, just to remind you all as to how we're moving as far as maintenance and sanitation and the management level there. As you know, we really only have 2 supervisors, and that is Greg Roberts, who's the department director, and Happy Howard. That has not always been the case. When we did a downturn, when there was a downturn in the economy and some people quit, and we never filled those positions. Some of you may remember employee Rodney Moreland, who retired. We never filled his position. You'll see that position come up. And we really are missing that supervisory level where it relates to streets, facilities, and then sanitation. And that's something that we had that worked well before. How we're working now is, you know, Mr. Roberts, not that anything's wrong with it, you'll see him sometimes driving a garbage truck, which I know he likes to do, but sometimes it you know, that has to happen in order to get things done.
And the public works line item, is that inclusive of the study that was done, or is for monies that will take us to a new facility?
The study is already underway. That was included in this year's budget. So we did not program in a capital project budget, mainly because Ms. Callan presents to you about 4 budget amendments a year. So we anticipate, based on the timeline for staff meeting with the folks at AECom, we probably are about 4 to 6 weeks away from them coming and presenting their results to you. Once they present their results to you, you will have the opportunity to let us know whether or not you want to move forward, and if you want to move forward, what that budget planning looks like.
Debt service for the general fund, we did not budget for any increased debt service, for a total increase of $1,256,705 over the 2016 as amended budget. Oh, I'm sorry. A small, planning and community had a $10,000 increase, and that is due to various different line items. So everything is, any major, I don't know of any major changes yet.
Office supplies.
Office supplies. This is how our general fund expenditures spread out. Public safety, like we mentioned earlier, is 36% of our total general fund expenditures. General government and all long list of departments at 32%. Debt service 8%. Culture and recreation 11%. Community and development planning 3%, and public works 7%. Some of the major increases in the budget, as we mentioned earlier, the one-time franchise payment increased to a Greystone self-imposed audit over the last 5 years. We do have our local option sales tax agreement. It will increase 1.14%. Our share will increase 1.14%. It went from 26.19 to 27.33 of the 1% sales tax. So we will realize more sales tax due to that, hopefully. In 2018, it increases to 28.47, but 2018 is the last increase that we'll see. Then it levels off until 2022. Then back to negotiations. As I mentioned earlier, a slight increase in the tax digest. We've got a 2.5% increase, and again, that will be due to new growth because, as mentioned earlier, and as if we talked to some of you, you have no interest in property tax increase, so we will be rolling back. If you don't roll back, we will have to advertise for a property tax increase, and you will roll back the millage equivalent of assessed value of any increase at assessed value.
How does that work in a downturn then?
Interesting, very interesting. You do a millage roll up. It is not considered a tax increase by law. And we had that situation in 2011. We did not raise the millage rate, though, because, right, correct, correct. Because we thought that it would have been perceived as a tax increase. And that was when times were really tough. But yeah, we would not have to advertise for a tax increase, and we would have raised the millage rate. Some other increases are the Motorola and radio system microwave purchase. This is the 2-year agreement.
It's a 2-year agreement that some of you saw as a 10-year agreement, but 2 years with Cobb County. As you know, we are linked to Cobb County. One of the things, as we work through everything with IT, that I've asked for is a comprehensive strategic plan from Cobb County so we can know what those costs are long-term. You know, quite frankly, in the last couple budget years, you know, it's come up in 6 months prior to the new budget, we got to get this, we have to get this. So those ticket items are pretty hefty. So, you know, here, you know, you're looking at $200,000+ a year. So when you're having to shell out those types of funds, it would be good for us to know at a minimum 5 years out. I would at least like to know 10 years out so we can see what those costs are associated being linked with Cobb County. It's a great thing, but there's a price tag to it.
We do have salary increases programmed in the budget. We did think that January 1st would be the best time to decide what percentage, cost of living or merit increase. The theory behind that is our fiscal year starts in July. And from July to December, we start getting a good history of what sales tax looks like, what our franchise payments look like, and we have most of our property taxes in. So that's a really good time to make a decision, a conservative decision on what we actually can afford versus committing to something now and not knowing what the future revenues look like.
And the percentage that we budgeted for, or I should say the number that we based it off of to include in the budget is 3%, even though, as Karen said, the numbers may come in, you may make a decision to do more than 3%, but we didn't do any less. We didn't budget for any less than what was programmed for last year, even though the number's higher because the salaries have been adjusted higher. But the 3% is what's plugged in the budget. And you will all be able to make that decision, what you choose to do later on in the year.
I have a question about the study that was done to see if they were, to come out. Would this adjust people to that recommendation, or it's just getting them a little closer to 3%?
Everybody's within the pay scale. Probably what you may hear, there's some individuals who want to be graduated into the pay scale based on their tenure here at the city. We can't afford to do that. What I did propose back when we did the study was at year 3, next year's year 3, is for us to take a look at the pay scale and go back to whether it's Evergreen or another company to take a look at evaluating where are we with the current market. And we need to do that every 3 to 5 years. We also need to program in a cost of living increase, which is going to be hefty. But the advantage of a cost of living increase is not only that it adjusts the salaries, but it adjusts the pay scale. So your pay scale never sits stagnant. So if your pay scale sits stagnant, it doesn't matter if you're having increases, your hiring salaries continue to stay suppressed and continue to stay low. Mm-hmm. So that's why you do the cost of living increases. We can't afford to do cost of living increases every year. I think every 3 years would be good. I think you do more than 5 years, we're extending it too far out. I think all of us know the economy is turning. People are now hiring. Nowhere near, where we were 10 years ago, but it is turning. So what we've seen, I think I sent you all a copy of what's been put out as it relates to hiring for government employees. It's tough and it's competitive. So we want to make certain that, in all areas that we're being competitive for hiring salaries. So next year would be the time. We can talk about that at the retreat, what that number looks like.
So the Evergreen study was for a 3-year time, preparing for employment.
It's for however long we want it, but the standard recommendation on any pay scale is that you evaluate it every 3 to 5 years. That's best practices.
And this prevents us from getting behind like we were in the last few years.
Yes.
Because the longer you wait to evaluate it, the larger the chunk you have to.
That's
throw
right.
into the pot.
The problems become compounded because at that point, you can't keep up with where the economy has grown, and that's pretty much where we were.
Compression.
Compression. So that's the issue that the employees are complaining about. If they have not, if they've decided to stay in the same role, as long as they've been here, say they've been here 20 years, their salary is probably compressed. And that's, that's not unique to Douglasville. That's unique to most local governments. And actually a lot of employers specifically as it relates to the economy.
That's true. The next big increase in our budget is the InterDev implementation. And I've got, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
As you know, we have gone through exhaustive study on our IT infrastructure. And as I mentioned to you all on several occasions, IT not only just affecting IT, but everything that we have to do in the city, including the agenda management system, including the EAP software transition that we're looking at doing, and just everyday operations. So the monies that we're going to take from those franchise fees covers the entire 18-month agreement. My expectation is that the study will not only help to improve everything that we have so that when we're bringing on new software and new items that we're current and we're up to date, and also we're coming up with a replacement plan. One of the things that was pointed out in the study was our public safety building is 7 years old. So it's hard to imagine that it's 7 years old, but that means the equipment in that building is also 7 years old, and there's not a written master plan for a replacement schedule. IT items are costly. What we get out of this study is a replacement schedule so that we know, no, we may not necessarily replace at that point, but we at least have the warning signs that we're not hit with $100, $200, if not more, $1,000 type of investment that we have to make. I would say infrastructure-wise, our police department, public safety complex by far has the most sophisticated system. They have very expensive toys. So we really need to know the lay of the land as far as where our investment is, and right now currently we don't have that. So that's what the 18 months will help us to get and have a better footing and a better plan. Also what this gives us is that these individuals will be here, and they will also provide education and training to our current staff members that we can't necessarily afford to send them off to training. So this will be on-the-job training that each and every one of them will be able to get. That is pretty much almost a once-in-a-lifetime sort of thing. So they'll be hands-on with a network engineer on-site helping to map our network toward best practices, as well as having oversight from a leadership team that's attached to InterDev.
And when we get ready to do our next software conversion, we'll be set up for success.
Yeah.
To make sure that the foundation is ready for that type of software.
And just to kind of give you an idea of financial software conversion, that's not something that's going to happen in 2 months or 3 months. That's something that happens well over a year to 16 months. So if our foundation is not set, it offsets everything that we have to do. It's part of the reason why we are where we are. So there have been some tough lessons we've had to learn from One Solutions, and one of them is that we have to get our foundation together, because once we implement that process, we're on a year to 18 month journey.
Mm-hmm. Other increases, capital purchases, as I mentioned earlier, the police vehicles aren't actually an increase, but we just want to make sure that you are comfortable that they are funded in this budget. Laptops are an increase because they're no longer covered under warranty. We do have a higher than usual contingency after we take out the InterDev portion of the one-time franchise payment. We have a remaining contingency $419,609, and that's having a contingency in your budget is a recommended practice by the Governor Finance Officer Association, or GFOA. And also and as Marcia also mentioned earlier, just in case SPLOST doesn't pass, there will be a contingency line item for some capital purchases.
And one, and there are a couple things that are in, SPLOST that we put in there that are maintenance items. One that just pops to the forefront are the fields at Jesse Davis. Those are big ticket items that, $419,000 is a good chunk, but 1 or 2 of those projects, we're done.
And then we're talking about fallow field with turf because it's in the floodplain and it floods every time. I got 2 emails yesterday about fallow field.
Mhm.
You know, that we do something, we'll go out and fix it or seed or whatever, and it just, when it rains, the heavy rain is, it's just destroyed. And I know that artificial turf has changed in the few years that the school system's gonna put that turf on all the fields. And so, it's very expensive, but it's durable. And that would be something to look at down the road for fallow field because it won't ever be able to support rain because it's in the flood.
And one of the things I'll add to that is, in talking with Bobby Willingham, who works at Parks and Recreation, over the next month or so, I think we need to sit down and have a conversation about field conditions in general. I think the bonus is that we're seeing heavy utilization of the fields. The downside is that we can't keep up with the heavy utilization of the fields. So I think that we have to make a decision that, based on our utilization, where do we want to be in the maintenance of the field? Where do we want those field conditions to be? There's no way that we can afford to maintain the fields and have them looking the way that they looked when they first opened. So the question is, what type of commitment, maintenance-wise, do we want to make, that we want to instruct staff? Because I think, you know, some of the conversations I've had with some of the folks recently, I think that there's a mindset, you know, we want it back to day one. We based on how we're using it, day one is not going to be possible. But we need direction from you all as to where you want to see it based on how popular the fields are becoming.
Under part 2.
Yes, all fields, yes, ma'am.
Definitely look into the expense associated going in that direction. Coming from Texas over the last vacation, that's what the fields, you see the fields there are, you know, the astroturf, artificial grass. So, it's definitely the way of the future.
The positions funded, code enforcement officer, we currently have 3 plus a sergeant, this will be adding 1. The operations coordinator, and that is, we deleted a position basically in the community development department and added operations coordinator, and this is for Marcia's office, and added a maintenance supervisor position, as we discussed prior. That concludes the general fund budget explanation. Any questions on general fund or comments? Sir?
On the capital purchases where you have police vehicles and laptops being replaced because they're out of warranty, is that a normal practice? That if the warranty ends and you're replacing something, even if there's may not be anything wrong with it?
I think there's a better explanation, not saying that Ms. Callen's explanation was not good, but further to give you more detail, the deputy chief, if she wouldn't mind, as to why they're being replaced.
On the warranty issue, we're talking about the laptop computers. As you know, technology goes out of date so quickly, and then once the laptops are out of warranty, sorry, I'm sick. Once the laptops are out of warranty, they're very costly to repair, and, you know, getting the same technology, it's already improved so much, it's improving all the time. The reason we want to replace all of them at once is because we do have several going down, and the officers, they may have to get in different vehicles, and the different laptops or tablets require docking stations in the vehicles where they can plug them in. And if you only use part of them, an officer may get in with this tablet, and he's not going to be able to put his laptop in there and work off of it if it's still got a docking station for another device.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And just so everybody knows, this is very different from your laptop you have at home. It's not the same setup. So, and we are replacing all of them at once to prevent what the deputy chief is saying, so that you're not using 2 different types of technology, because you don't want to have the officer getting out of the car. You want to have a seamless transition as he or she is out there on the street writing the reports and writing the documentation. And quite frankly, to the deputy chief's point, just like with radio upgrades, the laptops is probably something we need to have in the 5-year capital plan. The reality of it is, because how technology changes and what you need, probably every 5 years we need to be on a rotation and replacing the laptops.
I was going to say to the gentleman also, when I went to meet with the police department, they showed me the laptops, and they're kind of clunky. thing that functionally, that, is the problem now is they don't stay charged when they turn their car off. And so if they have a situation where they have to go in, they're coming back, they have to turn the car back on, it has to rev back up, get connected, and then do a report. Where they could be moving and doing something else if they get called, it just really doesn't make things seamless now. So now the laptops that will come in, these ones are antiquated. They'll bring the other laptops or tablets in, they can turn the car off and on, and they'll still run, so they'll be able to do the reports on those laptops.
Deputy Chief, along that line, would there not be an issue with, software support once it goes out of warranty and technology passes its by? I mean, if you only replace part of it, then you have two different software that you have to maintain. Is that now becoming more expensive as they go out of warranty?
Correct.
The-
The software updates and only a lot of applications. So much of it is done by computer. The officers are in there, calls are being dispatched, information's coming on the computer, and it's not there. It just slows the whole process down.
And to your point, Councilman Adams, another reason that probably we need to be on that 5-year rotation because of the software updates.
Moving on to our special revenue funds. Total budget for our public purpose corporation, which is we call our defects building. This is the building, our government building on Durley Lane. This houses the defects, pardon and paroles, and Department of Corrections. I asked her that earlier to remind me, and I didn't write it down. Department of Corrections, total budget. Their lease payments pay their debt service. So in August 1st, 2026, we will own the building, and it will have been paid for by the lease payments from the tenants. It pays the debt service exactly.
Their lease payments to us pay our debt service.
Yes, sir, yes. Yeah, their lease payments pay our debt service. Rental car fund, we get a tax each time people come into the city and use a rental car. They submit revenues to us on a monthly basis. We get about $165,000 each year. That is transferred out to the Conference Center Construction Fund to pay off the deficit, which should be paid off in about 5 more years. Convention and Visitors Bureau, there was a decrease in $4,021 decrease, and that is due to closing down the gift shop.
Yes.
Revenues and decreased $4,021, and there were some associated expenses with the inventory that also decreased. Conference Center Fund, which is also funded by our 8% hotel motel tax. The decrease there is due to the current year. We had revenues from selling the building, the former City TV building. So as 2017, we don't anticipate any additional revenues from sale of building.
And just so you know, the Conference Center Authority still owns the old Conference Center and the former Hair Barn building. Both of those are currently leased out, but those are the 2 remaining properties that they own. But this 226 was from the sale of the other building.
The Confiscated Asset Fund is also a special revenue fund. And the way the city of Douglasville budgets, we only budget revenues based on cash in the bank. So we don't budget based on anticipated revenues. Therefore, you are always guaranteed those revenues. And I think there's some other cities, and there is some confusion about how this budget works, but we only budget based on cash in the bank, not anticipated revenues. The chief is responsible for approving purchases out of this, and we have proposed $227,000 for 2017. The multiple grant fund budget, we're showing a decrease of $760,000. That is due to the prior year we had the State Route 5 Bright Star I-20 study, but that we do not have in the current year. Riverside Bridge, we did have a budget in the prior year, but this year we're only going to do a study on that, on the Riverside Bridge. So we have a small amount budgeted versus last year. And in the Welcome Center, we have funds in the fiscal year 17 for that, as well as $303,000 for the LMIG.
LMIG is already designated
You all decide that every year, from your list of streets.
Yeah, and you get LMIG funds every year as well. So we have 2016, and then 2017, we get them a year in advance.
Okay, do we have a list of the streets of priorities? People ask me all the time.
Okay.
We need to get the list, right? Which street is on the list?
The final fund is the enterprise fund, which is our sanitation fund. We do have an increase of $251,000 proposed in the 2017. Greg Roberts feels very comfortable that our construction roll-off revenues will increase due to all the new construction going on around the city. That accounts for 99% of the $251,000. The other financing sources decrease. In 2016, we did use part of the fund balance to balance the budget because there are quite a few equipment purchases that he had in the prior year that we don't have in the current year, for a total increase of $47,113 in revenues. The sanitation fund expense, we do have an increase in personal services, and that is due to a sanitation supervisor. And contract services, we do have a slight increase in landfill cost and property insurance. Supplies, that is where we have some increases for beautification, landscape contracts, KDB, recycling programs. And in capital outlay, that is, we budgeted one less vehicle. Those vehicles are very expensive. Other financial uses, that is transfer to the city general fund. That is a cost allocation for services that Marcia and I provide to the sanitation fund, pays the enterprise fund. Going back to the general fund, I know Marcia wanted to go over some other small items that we do have programmed in there, like insurance broker.
Yes, and I covered a couple of these early on, but the insurance broker is there. You know, we talked about getting a professional come in to help us look and investigate alternatives for, or I should say bid out our insurance this year. So we're going to be looking to do that in the fall. You'll see that there are several studies. I mentioned earlier, downtown master plan, the Old Mill study, and a variety of things that are in the budget. What we're trying to do, and our approach to cost savings for you all, is to make certain that anything that we do, a good example is a maintenance and sanitation facility. The hotel study is that we make certain that we do an exhaustive study of any capital project that you all are looking to do. Yes, it may cost on the front end, but hopefully we can save time, money, and provide some level of efficiency on the back end and help you all make a better, sound decision based on engineering and professional expert information. We believe we have good information, but specifically as it relates to engineering, those aspects, we're not the experts in that, and we don't have an engineer on staff. So those are a lot of the questions, and those are a lot of the things that revolve around the bulk of the cost when you're looking at capital improvement projects. So that's our approach to trying to make things, to give you the best information you need for your projects.
What about status in the Plaza East?
On Plaza, for the Welcome Center, the Welcome Center Plaza project, you all know Michelle Wright came before you, and there's going to be an item on your agenda that we're looking at, that they're asking you to commit to a contract price of, I don't have the exact number, but I know it's over $600,000+, to then go back to the one contractor that bid on it to negotiate. You all have to make a decision if you want to do that or not. And what language you want in the agreement to assure that you're not stuck paying the $600,000+. That's well over what you can afford to pay. That grant only covers now the plaza. You get no monies to do any renovation in the Welcome Center. One of the things that we were looking at doing in the Welcome Center, Ms. Vicky corrected me, $769,000. That money does not cover the Welcome Center. And just to remind you, what the Welcome Center project was going to do was to help to relocate the restrooms from out of City Hall and prevent from having to have a manned person in City Hall, where we don't necessarily have a secure area for people to use public restrooms, and to make public restrooms in the Welcome Center and to have a welcome center area for visitors. There is no funding for that in the money that you're receiving from that T grant. That is one of the projects that we put on the SPLOST list under facilities upgrade, that if you want to do that, that's an opportunity. You can do it under SPLOST since your funding won't be able to allow you to do that. One thing to just kind of remind you of also when it comes to your major construction projects, the same issue that we're having with the T projects, we may even have on our own projects when it comes to the labor force in a lot of these major construction projects, and that's the reason why the prices are escalated and expensive. So if we get back the study from the maintenance and sanitation facility and you get sticker shock, it's probably because construction cost has increased. So I'm not quite certain where that number is, but I'm expecting it to be probably higher.
Just as a point of clarification, is it not correct that the reason we cannot negotiate that $769,000 is because we're not under contract? And until we're under contract, there only being one bidder, we cannot negotiate until we have a signed contract. Then we can go back and, what is the word the city uses?
Value engineer?
Value engineer the project.
Yes, sir.
That's basically where we are with it right now.
Yes, sir.
We
That is
have to
correct.
have a contractor signed on the line before we can do the negotiation,
That is correct.
according to the requirements of the grant.
That is correct.
Councilman Anderson, you help me, because I was getting a little bit nervous. So we cannot send out a request for proposal or?
It's already done.
It's already been done, there's
And
only
only
one
had-
bidder.
Why would we do it again?
We've already done it 3 times.
I mean,
Yes.
there comes a point where, in my industry, you get tired of bidding.
Yeah.
Let's either do it or let's not do it. And how
Okay,
many times do you want me to bid for the possibility to get it once?
Yeah.
and but the T grant's
All you
only
do is-
400,000.
600.
600,000. So we have about a 25% overage there that we've got to figure out how to
To-
streamline in order to stay within the grant funds.
Yeah.
But once we sign the contract, we can negotiate to try to come
That is
within
correct.
the
Correct. But you are
parameters of
signing a
our-
contract for $769,000. Just know that. So I'm working with the staff attorney to talk about legal ways to make certain that we can get out of that if that's negotiation cannot happen between you and the contractor, if that is what you want to
I
do.
don't think that we would want to sign a contract and tie ourselves to basically a match of $169,000.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
See, there's so many huge projects going on throughout the Atlanta area,
Mhm.
like the baseball field, football, complexes. So they're sucking out the workforce.
Yeah.
And so, and these are the types of people that we need to do the plaza. And, so it's all about, dollars and having the people available to do the work.
Well, how about, when I went to Publix today, I had a certain amount to spend and that's it. So can we just spend what we have in budget?
It's not going to get you what you.
What you need?
Based on what they can do, because that's all we're doing is
With those
we're focusing on the plaza.
And not even the
we're-
others.
And not even the welcome center now.
Yeah, you've downgraded your fountain. You've gone to pretty much bare bone fixtures. You have the same layout, but the majority of your money is underground.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You'll never see it again,
exactly.
just like the storm drain system under this building.
Yes.
Is the grant, good music or is it, in other words, you can push the grant?
We're too far down the road to push it back, and it's very specific. I've had this conversation with some of y'all. The grants are awesome and they're great, but there's a catch with it. So my philosophy on it is, as we move forward and we move down the road, we really have to be very meticulous about what we apply for. In this grant, maybe in hindsight, we need to have someone sit down and work with us on doing a better job at putting the numbers together specifically for the project, because if, those of us sitting in the room, we can think $600,000 when you start thinking of doing major construction in a historic building, also doing the plaza, underground, that's a lot of money to cover or I should say, that's a lot of work to cover in $600,000. So, were we overshooting ourselves by just, the excitement of the fact that, we're able to get this grant? But we really have to, moving forward, being very much more methodical about what we apply for and being very strategic when we apply for these grants. And then when we actually do apply for them, being prepared for the match, having the contingency, and then also having it meet a special purpose.
And I think it's also important, I know this is something we'll discuss in our committee meeting, but it's also important that we be careful when we begin value engineering.
Yes.
Because you basically come out with a product that is not something that would meet your needs, much less be what I would call a value.
Right.
I think we had that example a couple of times in this building.
Yes, sir.
And we don't want to lose credibility by applying for a grant and then not.
No. No.
Because then if we apply again, it's like crying wolf.
Right, right. Yeah, and the T grants have done very well. We've done very well in that position, specifically through GDOT. We just have to put a little bit more thought into it when the next round of grants come up and what we want to do, specifically knowing that the price of construction is increasing.
Any of these slots, like, is that going to be focused on any of this project?
Yes, if you recall, we are putting our monies in one category. We're looking to, you all had the consensus to bond with the county, so we'll be bonding for overwhelming majority of that money to be able to get that money in the beginning. So that's we estimate about 37 million, but we bond for about 30 million. We have about 45% is in transportation. That's the majority. Those are the projects we know based on our comprehensive transportation plan that we're ready to move forward on. Specifically, we're resurfacing. A lot of it doesn't have to deal with new roads, but that's where the majority of it's located. We have a significant amount in public safety to deal with body cameras, some of the things with the facilities, also with the radio communication systems. That radio tower was a huge ticket item. Then we have Parks and Recreation. Those involved with what happens and what do we do with what's left over with Highway 92 and Jesse Davis Park. How do we address the concerns of aesthetics and just the functionality of that park once that road is built? And then also some of the things that the mayor addressed as far as field conditions at all of our fields, where we want to look. So there's a percentage of money there. And then finally, the last pool of money, which is not necessarily the smaller amount, but about 20%. We're looking to do facility improvements at City Hall. We don't have a maintenance facility at Parks and Recreation building. We need to figure out where to house those, of course, because I don't know if you know, most of our equipment is at the old Fire Station 10, is there. And then also to cover some of the costs of the maintenance and sanitation facility, if that's what direction we want to go in. As you know, the enterprise fund can't cover 100% because we do more than just sanitation. So the general fund will have to cover some of those costs. Whatever we do, whether SPLOST passes or not, I would encourage you, whether it's, from some of the money in the contingency, that we do need to look at some alternatives for our guys in the maintenance and sanitation department as far as how they meet. There are huge concerns about when they do safety meetings and how they meet. It's not in the best condition as far as how we have those guys set up. Greg will never complain, but we can do better.
It's like my dad's garage that he had with his brothers. Marcus got by the garage. Said, I'm used to it, but there were tires everywhere. They were pushing out chairs. The water was dripping down. When we're trying to have a meeting with the maintenance and sanitation, totally different from the police department. And they're, that's one of their concerns. They just feel like they're the stepchild. So facilities will help them.
Yeah. And they do meet a lot for safety reasons. They meet early in the morning to do assignments, so they are in need of an appropriate place to meet.
Plus, the problem, it's hard to work on their equipment a lot.
Yeah,
Space.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
Service. Space.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
This gives a nice overview of why we're going for SPLOST.
Yeah.
People who are watching this and will be watching this understand that that's why we're really, really interested in making sure we get this SPLOST.
Yeah, it would be very helpful. I will say that pretty much everything on your list of what the public has said they're interested in, and the things that staff members presented to you are things that probably have been in the on the waiting list corral of needs that we have. And, you know, if it doesn't pass, we'll just start, you know, checking them off. But the issues do continue to be compounded as they continue, specifically as it relates to roads and infrastructure, because those are huge ticket items.
And that penny is, we have already done that, we're just missing it for 6 months, right?
Yes, it expired in, the last one for the jail expired in April.
So if we picked it up, it would just be like the penny we've had for the past 5
Yes.
years.
Yes.
We haven't again.
Yeah, but we haven't benefited from that penny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the taxpayers, the
Right.
taxpayers have been
Right.
paying that, but, as far
County's
as
been getting all
the
the
county
money.
has gotten it.
Mhm.
Our city, people that are arrested, though, go to that jail.
Sure, yes,
Yeah,
they
but
do.
we do pay a fee.
So, and the people who pay won't know.
We pay for that.
Yeah, we pay, yeah.
We pay, it's not for free.
Yes.
Other questions? Questions from anybody in the audience? Concerns?
So that would be, we will, we're still on item 2. We do have it on the legislative agenda for the 16th to be adopted on the 20th. So that would conclude item 2 on the agenda. Item 3 is public comments and discussion. Is any public comments or discussion? All right, item 4 is presentation on proposed use of any increased revenues from occupation tax. And we do have a slight increase in occupation tax, which we will be using for general maintenance and operation purposes. Any comments or discussion on item 4?
Is that, Ms. Campbell, is that general maintenance and operations of the department that, where those funds come in from, i.e. your building department in particular, is it itemized or is it earmarked?
It's not earmarked specifically, yeah. Mhm. And item 6 is conclusion of our public hearing. Thank you.
If you don't have any comments prior to the mayor adjourning the meeting, we will have another opportunity to discuss, as Ms. Cowan said earlier, at the legislative work session on the 16th. So we'll go over it again, questions or concerns, and then final adoption is Monday, the 20th. Mayor?
Thank you so much to the staff